everyone, my name is Lisa Whitehouse and I'm the artist behind Whitehouse Art. For today's tutorial, I want to walk you guys through how I painted this mushroom using watercolors. For a list of everything I used in the tutorial, be sure to check out the video description below where I included a list of all the colors that I used. I also used a cup for water, a round palette, as well as a round brush. At one point in the video, you'll see me use a small flat brush, but it's certainly not needed to do this painting. Let's get started. So first things first, I like to start with a very light sketch. I keep it light so that I don't have to worry too much about erasing it when I'm done. Now I'm gonna go just the tiniest bit darker just so you guys can see the outline that I'm following, but if you can, make it as light as you can while still being able to see it, of course. We're just gonna go with a super simple mushroom shape. Once I have a rough outline, it's time to get started with adding paint. I like to start in one section and then kind of bounce my way around so that I'm never butting colors up together when I don't want to. That way they don't bleed all together. Sometimes I do want that look, but for this mushroom, I'm gonna keep the bleeding to a minimum. So with watercolor, you always wanna leave your white parts white, so the white of the page will show through. So what I'm gonna do is anywhere I want to spot, I'm just going to leave it white. And then what I'm gonna do is start adding my red paint. So I did a little bit of water first, just the smallest amount. And then you'll see as I add the red paint where that water is. And then you can use your brush to pull around the painting and add more. And I like to use varying pressure on the brush to get different amounts or different sizes of circles. And because this mushroom has different size spots, I'm just gonna kind of be a little bit erratic with it. And at the bottom, I'm gonna do a few more that kind of follow the bottom. But what you'll notice is as the paint dries, and then you still go over it with fresh water, you're gonna get variation in the size and the intensity of the color, and you might even get some blooms happening. And the blooms are those little like cauliflower shapes that happen with watercolor that personally I love so much. So like let those happen. Continue to add new water, being mindful that the more water you add, the more time it's gonna take to dry. So you don't wanna have so much water that your paper is buckling like crazy. You'll notice I have quite a bit here, but I'm not gonna continue to add more. So now I'm gonna dry my brush and pull a little bit of this water around and just add more color. And I don't wanna go too crazy with the spots, so I'm gonna loosen or lighten them up, sorry, not loosen. I'm gonna go a little more sparse in some areas. I want it to feel very organic. And like I said, I'm gonna have more towards the bottom because this type of mushroom has more white spots on the bottom than the top, more small white ones. So once I've got that down, I'm gonna go around and add a little bit more. So now I'm gonna mix my brown with a bit of my red and pick some of the areas that are a little bit darker and just start dropping in that brown and red color. This burnt sienna is a warmer red, or sorry, a warmer brown, and it's quite nice for doing mushrooms because it just adds more of that fall vibe to it. So I'm pretty happy with that for a first coat. I'm gonna let that dry and then I'm gonna work my way down to the bottom because I wanna start getting a little bit of a base on the bottom where some of my greenery is. So for the greenery, I start by just adding some like loose shapes with clear water. And by loose shapes, I literally mean like I'm holding the brush kind of erratically and making my way around the painting. Then I'm gonna take my green and just kind of drop in a little bit of green here and there. And the reason I'm not being too careful yet is because this is sort of a backdrop for some of my greenery. So I might throw in a few leaves here and there, a few blades of grass, but I'm not getting detail at this point. And you kind of go to the point you want your greenery to go, knowing that you may go a little bit past it. But this is about what you want for that stage. So in order to loosen up my painting a bit, what I like to do is take some clear water, and because this is still wet, I can go in and sort of add a few like little splooshes of clear water, and if it's still wet, they'll bleed outward. Now you don't have to do this. If you want it to be a little bit of a tighter painting, you can certainly leave as is. And if too much bleeds out, you can always take your clean, dry brush and just lift it out, like so. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of color and just do a couple of little splatters here and there. Maybe throw a few in the grass. Just like that. So right now, we're at a point where we have a really nice base layer for the mushroom and the grass. And now I'm gonna work on the bottom of the mushroom. Now I'm gonna just get straight into it without drawing it in between, but I'll have to be mindful of this line up here, so I won't wanna butt right up to it, or else the whole bottom of the mushroom will turn red. So I'm not too worried about it turning green at the bottom because we're gonna have a bunch of the greenery go in front anyway, so I'm not mindful there, but I'm leaving a thin white line right up here. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of Payne's Gray and just drop it in here. Now, if you've worked with Payne's Gray before, you know that it bleeds beautifully. There's something about different pigments, they bleed differently. So some will not flow at all, and some do like a ton. It just varies depending on the pigment, but I personally just love Payne's Gray. I'm throwing in a little bit of the burnt sienna just to make sure we have a little bit of continuity here. But this is about what I would want for that first layer. And because I don't like how this tone is very similar to this tone, I'm gonna lift out a little bit of that splatter here. And then what I'm going to do is blow dry the whole thing, and we can get started on the second layer. So now that the painting is dry, we're gonna go back in and do a similar thing that we did on the first layer, but just adding more dimension to it. So now the parts that are lighter, we might not overlap them again. So I wanna have a little highlight here, so I'm probably not gonna overlap that again. So we're taking our red, and this time I'm just gonna come in with my red and put it not everywhere, but just the places that I want to appear a little bit darker. So I'm being mindful again to not overlap the color that I have, the whites. And I'm throwing in some burnt sienna here and there. But now I'm not gonna hit this area here. I'm gonna let that appear lighter. And this is a good stage if you have some pencil lines that you really wanna cover, you can kind of carefully cover them. Some of them I'm gonna erase and some I'm going to cover. And as you can see, I'm being mindful to really carefully go around. I just threw in a tiny bit of yellow ochre. You don't want your painting to be all one color. With watercolors, I feel like that kind of separates good art versus sort of art that's a little bit more beginner, is if you're not mixing colors. So the way to sort of elevate your watercolors is to make sure you're constantly mixing new colors and not using colors always just straight out of the tube. And if you're still learning brush control and all those great tools, definitely like don't be afraid to make the mistake of doing very little mixing, but certainly if you can start getting in those habits, it's good. So now I'm going to start adding some foliage. I'm gonna start with my darker foliage first. So I'm gonna mix some Payne's Gray and some green. The green's just about to get really dark. And then I'm gonna start adding some grass here. So now you're gonna wanna add some shapes. So using my round brush, I'm just adding some leaf shapes. I'm still not being overly careful about it. And I'm going pretty dark. Now I'm gonna add just some straight out green. I just go back and forth to do those greens, adding varying pressure. And we're wanting it to stay pretty messy, so don't worry too much if your foliage doesn't look like mine. You can have some that kind of spill over like this way. And the more Payne's gray you add, obviously the more dark it'll get. And you can have some that get smaller. Just don't be afraid to have fun with it and learn how to do your leaves through this painting. So now I'm gonna take a bit of green and mix it with some yellow ochre because I wanna have like a variety of leaf colors in here. You can even take a little bit of red, throw in a bit of that red somewhere. I'm just like constantly going back and forth and adding different colors. So this one I'm doing like a little, I don't know what you call it, like looks kind of like wheat. And then when that dries, I'll go over with another layer. But now I'm gonna bounce up to the top and I'm gonna do that shadow that comes under the mushroom. So I already kind of have it there, but I wanna make it darker right here. So now I can go right up to the mushroom because I can see that that's dry. And I'm gonna take my Payne's gray and I'm just gonna butt right up to that now. And if yours isn't dry, feel free to blow dry it in between. But now I'm trying to add some of that detail. So I'm taking the side of my dry brush and I'm gonna go kind of like this and dry brush it a little bit. And I'm throwing in some random colors here off my palette. These are all colors that I know are in the painting because I've mixed them for other things. Then I'm just gonna darken it right at the base again. Create my shadow. Now I'll let that darken a bit, just while it, not darken, I'll let that dry a bit. And then I might add a tiny bit more right at the base. So I'm always kind of like adding more versus trying to go darker while it's still wet. Now I want to go in and add a few little shadows around my mushroom dots. So I'm gonna start with the areas that are already dry and I'm just going in with the tip of my brush. You want to use very little pressure. And some are gonna get wider than others, and that's okay. And I'm basically going in creating little shadows. So my light source is coming in from here, so I'm having all of my shadows be underneath the dots, away from the light source. These ones are still wet here, so they might not take as well. And don't worry too much about how perfect they are. I'm keeping this fairly loose, so some of mine are perfect, some are not, and that's okay. Now these shadows that are underneath where the highlight is, I'm gonna go a little bit more red here, a little brighter. Versus having the Payne's gray mixed in. So I'm happy with that. And now I'm gonna go back to my foliage and add another dark layer over top. So I'll go like up here. And a few blades of grass. I'm not gonna go too crazy. I do wanna keep my foliage fairly light. I'm pretty happy with that. I probably went a little crazy, but it's just so much fun. So now I'm gonna take my large flat brush I say large, it's more like medium. And throw in a few droplets of water down here just to make it a little more erratic, have a little less control. And I have some of them go outside. And I'm gonna do the same thing with my red. Now I'm just going over here, maybe throwing in a little down here, a little burnt sienna down here. And while I was doing all that, this part here dried, so now I can go in, like I said, with more Payne's Gray and just sharpen up this shadow here. So now I'm not adding water first, I'm just going straight in and adding a few lines. I'm just making sure I like the way this shadow looks underneath. And then I can go in and add a bit more form to the bottom of the mushroom. So that's all I'm gonna do today, and then I'll just sign it. I hope you guys had fun following along with me. If you wanna see other tutorials like this one, be sure to hit subscribe on my channel. And please leave a comment or a thumbs up. It all helps the YouTube algorithm let others see my art. Thank you for watching.